Good afternoon. My name is Zakano Cummins, and this is Week 5 Media's presentation. Let's start with Bergerman. Bergerman argues that preaching Jeremiah calls for imaginative, truth telling proclamation that faces communal trauma, names lost honestly, and insists on hope rooted in God's alternative vision rather than accommodation to prevailing powers. Let's look at the core thesis. Walter Bergerman framed preaching Jeremiah as a homiletical experiment. Let the canonical shape and prophetic voice of Jeremiah shape sermons, not to domesticate the text, but to let its prophetic daring confront contemporary communities. He insists preaching must be imaginative, courageous, and truth telling. Let's look at some key themes and implications for preachers. Imagination over accommodation. Bergerman defines Christian imagination as the capacity to present as a centered, God-centered vision that resists simply adapting the gospel to surrounding culture. Jeremiah models this by using vivid imagery to disclose realities beyond surface appearances. Trauma and truth telling. Jeremiah's prophetic task is to confront the trauma of lost certainties. For example, the fall of Jerusalem. Bergerman urges preachers to avoid euphemism and to name communal grief and disorientation directly so that authentic hope can emerge. Authorized risk. Preaching like Jeremiah requires authorization. Ordination is one form, but Bergerman emphasizes personal vocational memory. Preachers must recover how they themselves were authorized to speak boldly. Then canonical integrity. He critiques lectionary practices that fragment the Old Testament and urges attention to the book's canonical shape so sermons can reflect the text's own trajectory and tensions. Then, these are practical homiletical moves Bergerman recommends. Attend to the book's shape. Let Jeremiah's mixture of lament, oracle, and narrative inform sermon structure rather than forcing a tidy moral. Use prophetic imagination. Employ imagery and narrative to make an alternative social reality imaginable to the hearers. Finally, name loss before offering hope. Honest proclamation of suffering is the precondition for hope. Hope is not sentimental, but emerges after truth is spoken. And then last but not least, risk prophetic counter speech. Preaching should challenge dominant social narratives, such as national exceptionalism, and call communities to relinquish false securities. Now let's switch gears and look at Dr. Gary Yates. Dr. Gary Yates presents Jeremiah as a passionate, historically grounded prophet whose message combines fierce judgment for covenant unfaithfulness with sustained hope for restoration. His lecture series traces Jeremiah's call, social critique, prophetic sign acts, and personal confessions, and the book's composition and theology. Core portrait. Yates framed Jeremiah as a prophetic voice shaped by crisis. Called in the late 7th century BCE, speaking through Josiah's reform into the fall of Jerusalem and exile. Jeremiah confronts idolatry, social injustice, and false prophecy while also articulating promises of restoration, including the new covenant. So let's look at the structure of the lectures. This is what Yates covered. Call and vocation. Yates opens with Jeremiah's divine call and the prophet's reluctance and commissioning. I can understand that. Historical setting. Several sessions situate Jeremiah in Judah's final kings, the rise of Babylon, and the political pressures that shape prophetic speech. Composition and structure of the book. Yates treats compositional questions such as how oracles, narratives, confessions, and editorial layers form the present book. Then we have major thematic blocks. He works through marriage metaphors, temple sermons, laments and confessions, prophetic sign acts, oracles against nations, and the book of consolation. Key interpretive emphasis. Yeats highlights Jeremiah's emotional honesty. His laments and confessions reveal the prophet's inner structure and authenticate his message. Then, covenant theology. The book's judgment are rooted in covenant breach, restoration language, notably the New Covenant, which is central to Yeats' theological reading. Yeats emphasizes signs, acts, and confrontations with kings and false prophets as essential to understanding Jeremiah's public ministry. So when we look at Jeremiah's homiletical implications, when you read Jeremiah historically and pastorally, Yeats urges students and preachers to attend both to the book's historical circumstance and to its pastoral rhetorical force. And then you must attend to the genre and voice. And here Yeats recommends letting a mixture of oracle, narrative, and lament shape the interpretive and preaching rather than smoothing tensions away. And this concludes week 5's media summary. And I pray that you have been blessed.